Hello, friends. If it's Sunday, it's time for the Bach cantata SCHLEP. And I have a particular take on this week's SCHLEP because, frankly, we've already gone through the first three cantatas. Now, I know you might say out of 199 or 200 or however many there are, that's not very much. And it isn't. And I don't want you to think I've gotten tired of going through lots of bad Lutheran liturgical poetry in favor of the little nuggets of musical gold that Bach liberally sprinkles throughout his cantatas. No, indeed, we're just getting warmed up. But I did want to offer an entirely different take on the cantatas and an alternative method, an entree or key to at least some of them, so that you can also take this time to explore the ones that you think might interest you before we get to them. We're going to get to BWV 146 eventually, but you may well want to listen to it before then. And of course, some of the ones probably that have the big tunes, like, Ein Festeborg is Unser Gott and things like that. But, there are other ways to access some of the most enjoyable cantatas before we start talking about them and to sort of program your own listening. And I wanted to talk about that for this particular SCHLEP because I think it's an appropriate time at the beginning when we still have the opportunity to sort of plan how we're going to map our approach to these pieces. And it turns out that there is a disc that was issued in association with Hänssler Classics Complete Bach Cantata, Complete Bach Edition, and the Bach Cantatas with Helmut Rilling and the Stuttgart Bach Academy. And I wanted to tell you about it because it's a marvelous disc. And even if you don't like the Bach cantatas, you may well want to have this. It's this complete set, 2 discs, of all of the sinfonias and orchestral and instrumental music that Bach inserted into his cantatas. Now, this is useful for a couple of reasons. First, Bach, as you know, didn't write a lot of orchestral music. We've got the concertos and we've got the orchestral suites, but there's a lot more than that. And it's all attached to other things, like the cantatas. And so by detaching it and publishing it in a separate 2-disc set, you can have all of the sinfonias, all of the orchestral introductions. They're basically overtures, right? All of the overtures to the mostly larger Bach cantatas, which is wonderful. We listen to everyone else's overtures. We listen to Beethoven's overtures. We listen to some Handel overtures. We like overtures. Overtures are delicious. We listen to Rossini's overtures, God knows. So why not listen to Bach's overtures too? And the interesting thing about Bach's overtures is that some of them are going to be very familiar because he reused music that he otherwise had already employed in his, for example, Brandenburg concertos and some other works as well. And so when you hear some of these pieces, you may think that they sound familiar, and they will be familiar. And he reworked the music sometimes in very, very interesting ways. And I'm going to play you some musical examples of that, which I think will be a lot of fun and a wonderful, wonderful entree into some of the other cantatas that we're not going to get to in the next 10 years or so, For example, consider cantata BWV 146. That's a happy title. Well, actually, its title isn't any happier. Once we're done with it, you may prefer BWV 146. The title is something like Wir müssen durch viel Trübsal. It's we must pass through much misery. Actually, you might call the entire Bach cantata SCHLEP, we must pass through much misery, shouldn't we? That's something to consider. But seriously, it begins with a marvelous, big, long, chunky, 8-minute instrumental overture / sinfonia that you may recognize because it's the opening movement of Bach's most famous keyboard concerto, BWV 1052 in D minor. Ba-da-dum bum 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 ba dum bum ba-da-dum ba-da-dum ba. You know the one, right? Well, for this cantata, Bach has turned it from a harpsichord concerto into an organ concerto, which sounds even creepier. And if you know that concerto at all, remember it began life as a violin concerto, which is lost. But there are restorations of the violin part as it might conjecturally have been, and it can be played as a violin concerto. Usually it's played as a harpsichord concerto. Well, now it's an organ concerto. And it's really one of Bach's greatest instrumental movements and a perfect representation of this relentless passage through misery and sorrow. I mean, it really is, because it's a very grim movement, very creepy and stern, and also just sort of relentlessly motoric. It just keeps chugging along there in an obsessive rhythm. So it's absolutely perfect for that purpose. And actually, what's even more fascinating is that the second movement, which is as gloomy a piece as Bach ever wrote, also became the opening chorus of the cantata. And Bach really didn't change it at all. He took the entire second movement of the concerto, arranged for organ, and just stuck a chorus on top of it. It's one of the most remarkable transformations in all of Bach's music. But see, we can't talk about that till we get to the cantata and we get to hear some of it. And I can play comparisons. We're not doing any of that now. Now we're talking about the opening Sinfonia. And here it is. I'm going to play you the opening bit of it as arranged for organ. And boy, is it unforgettably creepy. Wow. I mean, if you think of Bach as, sort of this creaky medieval almost, it has that, you want to see like a haunted castle with the lightning going off in the background. And, it's absolutely perfect for that kind of thing. B-rated horror movie music. Here it is. And that's the opening Sinfonia of the cantata. And just for the record, there are in this collection here that I'm talking about 26 of them. 26 overtures of varying lengths. Some of them are quite short, only a couple minutes long, but some of them are pretty beefy, healthy, large movements, such as the one we just heard. The next one I want to tell you about, hang on a second, is BWV 52. That's it, BWV 52. Now, BWV 52 has the delicious title, False World, I Trust Thee Not. Another happy, and then, these are happy cantatas, most of them, False World, I Trust Thee Not has the most delightful opening. What is it? Well, it's the Brandenburg Concerto Number 1, the first movement of the Brandenburg Concerto Number 1, which, it's a jolly, rollicking, lovely piece with horns and oboes and all kinds of stuff in it. It also has something called a violino piccolo, a little violin, which Bach has really quite, I think, sensibly removed for the cantata version. And here is the opening of False World, I Trust Thee Not, the overture. Well, you know it, right? It's the Brandenburg Concerto Number 1. This is another one of those cantatas about, sin and degradation and, the general horribleness of everything. And again, BWV 52. Well, maybe we'll get to it next year sometime or in the next 2 years. But in the meantime, it may interest you because of this marvelous overture that Bach has arranged out of the Brandenburg Concerto. And that may be reason enough for you to want to explore the entire cantata. Another one in a similar vein, let me see which one this is. Hang on. It's on the back here. It's BWV 174. Yes, BWV 174. And that has, I'm trying to think of, I know what the title is. This is just a happy one, a generally happy one. That's I love the highest with my whole being. It's a praise cantata. Praise cantatas are kind of nice because they're generally cheerful, and the idea is to praise God with pleasantry and not with dismalness. And so that's a pretty jolly cantata. And for a jolly cantata, we need a jolly overture. And in this case, it's the Brandenburg Concerto number 3. Yes, the opening movement of the Brandenburg Concerto number 3. Now, that particular concerto, as some of you may know, is written for strings only. But for this particular arrangement, Bach has added some wind parts to spice it up a little bit and give the cantata, an even more joyful demeanor. And that's really kind of nice. Although, in order to get to the joyful demeanor, we have to do the previous 173 cantatas. Now, they're not all equally miserable. Just a lot of them are. But we will also find some cheerful ones, including next week, whenever we get to it, BWV 4, which has the deliciously perky title, Christ lag in Todesbanden, which is, Christ lay in the bounds of death. And the bonds of death are, that's a good thing. That's a good thing, liturgically speaking, because after Christ had lay in the bonds of death, he was resurrected, right? It's an Easter cantata, but we're not going to talk about that one until the next cantata SCHLEP. And it's also one of the more popular ones. But if you want to hear, again, some nice, lovely orchestral music and perhaps some more joyful cantata music before we actually get to it, BWV 174, which is the first movement of Brandenburg Concerto number 3, is a really good bet to get you started. And here is that opening. So there you go. Those are just 3 examples. And, some of these sinfonias are original. Some of them, of course, are extremely dark and gloomy because the cantatas are extremely dark and gloomy. But it's lovely, lovely music. And it's not vocal music. For those of you who find singing, especially singing in German, extremely irritating, you should know there's an entire 2-disc set, over 110 minutes of Bach's best orchestral music arranged as overtures to the cantatas. And it's well worth having. It's on Hänssler, and it's just called Complete Sinfonias. And so, it's just a wonderful disc to have to pad out your Bach collection anyway, and to supplement the dearth of true orchestral music by Bach that, we can't really get enough of. God knows we have enough of the cantatas, don't we? I mean, we have more than enough of those. So I wanted to tell you about that for today's Cantata SCHLEP, because I think, like I said, it offers a different means of entree into some of the works. And, I love these discs that function as kind of, musical Rosetta Stones. You get one disc or one set, and you have a key that allows you to explore on your own an entire universe, in this case, 26 different cantatas, which is a very goodly chunk of them. I mean, that's, more than 10% of all the cantatas. And you have a taste of all of them just by listening to these opening sinfonias. And so there you are. That is today's hopefully happier cantata SCHLEP. Next time, we will be back with BWV number 4, Christ lag in Todesbanden. Christ lay in the bonds of death. A happy cantata. Unbelievable, isn't it? And we'll be back to more, interesting Lutheran liturgical poetry. But that one is actually better than the others for reasons we will discuss then. So that's the teaser for our next Bach cantata SCHLEP. Until then, consider listening to some of these sinfonias. I love this set. I really do, because it was a way for me personally, and I speak from personal experience, to start listening to a lot of works that I never would have discovered otherwise. Never. It was wonderfully, wonderfully helpful, and a very, very smart collection. And you would think that, some of the other Bach editions would do it. But I don't know of any other collections that attempt to offer complete sinfonias to all the cantatas. But what a smart idea it was. And so we should take advantage and be smart ourselves. Keep on listening, folks. I'll see you next time for BWV4 in the Bach cantata SCHLEPs. Take care.